From meager beginnings as an adolescent ambulance washer in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, to a decade-long legacy of bringing you breaking news before it makes the news. Broadcasting live from the studios of Scared Monkeys Radio Network via C-band satellite W3-957, Access Communications Channel 7, and worldwide via digital streaming audio at scaredmonkeysradio.com. It's the Dana Pretzer Show. And now, your host, Dana Pretzer.
Okay, it's been 3 years since Natalee Holloway took a trip to Aruba. It's been 3 years since Natalee Holloway has been seen or heard from, and we've covered this topic many times here on the program. What I thought I'd do tonight is bring on a couple of investigators. We'll start out with Clint Van Zandt. Of course, you know Clint as a former FBI hostage negotiator, behavioral analyst, author, investigator, you name it, he's done it. And he's very familiar with the case, and he's also running into some rough weather where he's at, so we're glad to have Clint. Hi, Clint.
Hey, good evening. Yeah, it is. I mean, that was, tough times. Aruba for Natalee Holloway, I can't compare my condition to hers, but I've just spent the last hour in a bathroom in the basement, which is about the most secure place we have in our house, as tornadoes are going north and south of us here, so we're in the middle of a lot of weather right now.
Oh, it's not good, so stay safe, my friend. 3 years, I know you covered the Holloway case pretty much right from the beginning. Did you ever think that 3 years later you and I would be talking about it and still no conclusion?
Well, I really did, unfortunately. I was down in Aruba right afterwards. MSNBC sent me down to cover the story, and I was down there for a couple of weeks. I went to all the, alleged crime scenes, various locations. And, for those true believers, too, at the time I was going down, I had a number of psychics who heard I was going down through NBC, MSNBC. They told me exactly where she would be found. Of course, 3 or 4 different psychics told me, at least 3 or 4 different spots. I went down there, and in all honesty, everything else I did, I went to those locations. And I can tell you firsthand, she wasn't where the psychics told me to. So for those out there whose answer to me for 3 or 4 years has been, why don't you just contact a psychic? Why don't you get Sylvia Brown? The answer is no. And my entire career as an FBI agent, as a profiler, as an investigator, I've never seen a psychic work one time. I don't want to get up on the soapbox on that one, Dana, but I've had that ground into my head so much that sometimes I want to get it up front and deal with it right away.
Absolutely, and I don't blame you. You and I are both old school, and I guess that leads me into the investigation itself. Investigation 101, you and I have talked about it many times. Here we are 3 years later. How important was the first 24 or 48 hours of this investigation?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, and I know you and everybody else out there who's either in law enforcement or who's close to law enforcement by studying cases, and I know there's a lot of people that are very good at that out there, that's where you make or break a case. The first 12, 18, 24 hours, the crime scene that you do, the interviews, locking your subjects and witnesses in the interviews as soon as you can, recovering forensic evidence of crime scenes. If you don't get those things, I guess the analogy, and it's rather a poor analogy, but it's still, if you look at the John Benet Ramsey case, that same thing. The witnesses were not locked in, the crime scene was not secure, and that case, of course, is still cold, and here we are a decade later. But, we're talking about Natalee Holloway. And, it's still, every few months, I would, I'll be on a television show, or I'd talk to Natalee's mother, Beth, or I'd talk to a relative or something. There was a time when Natalee's relatives would call me up, and they'd bounce ideas off me. And as you know, when I was in Aruba, I had a chance to talk to one of the Cowpole brothers, who, to me, are still 2 of the 3 prime suspects that have never gotten off square one as far as I'm concerned. And I remember at the time talking to one of the Cowpole brothers, and I asked him, I said, you think this case will ever go away, whether Natalee is found or not? And he said, no, he said, it'll never go away. He said, Beth will never get it. He says, she'll stay at us forever. Well, I think Beth, Natalee's mother, tried to do that. She could be no more tenacious. She lost her marriage, I think, her second marriage, because of that. the time that she spent in Aruba and the time she spent trying to get her daughter back. And, I guess there is no worse position for a parent when they can't get that terrible word that you and I know is closure, when you can't find out what happened to your child, to your grandchild, to your spouse, to your significant other. It's one thing where you have to grieve and deal with someone, with a loved one who's died in an accident or has been murdered, but when you don't know, and when those stories, like when I was on Dr. Phil about 1.5 years, 2 years ago or so, and the story was being floated out that Natalee had been taken captive, that she was held on some third world country island as a sex slave. And I caught Beth and I were both on Dr. Phil that day, and I took Beth aside and I said, Beth, before we go on, I said, they're going to roll this story out there, and I said, please do not believe it.
Yeah.
I said, the FBI, the CIA, other investigative agencies, we've run these things down. There is no truth to it. And I remember at the time Beth says, well, Clint, I've got to have hope. I said, Beth, you can have hope, but don't have false hope. And I think that's the challenge that has confronted her and the investigators, at least back in the States, the frustrated FBI agents who went to Aruba and who weren't allowed to work the case because the Aruban police shut them out of it, wouldn't let them into it. The private investigators, the people who follow your show so closely, and others who have a feel for who the suspects were and what was going on in the case. I mean, to me, again, we have never gotten away from the two Cowpole brothers. We have never gotten away from Joran van der Sloot. We've come full circle, but those three, and especially if you recall very well about 6 months ago, where the Dutch undercover reporter got somebody up close to Joran van der Sloot, and then they taped his conversations in the car, and he all but admitted he had something to do with Natalee's death.
Right.
And the judge in Aruba says, well, this guy's lied so many times we can't tell truth from fiction, so we can't hold that against him. So, I mean, you can't even admit to murder and get charged with it down there, it looks like.
That is so true, and if you're just joining us, Clint Van Zandt is here, and we're looking at the Natalee Holloway investigation 3 years later. We've used the term corruption, and we used the term bungling, and just inability, inexperience, you name it. The investigators, the people that have had their hands tied because of the lack of cooperation from Aruba, Clint. But yet you still see stories being floated out there now. There's one that's going around about a telephone bill, and Beth was on her way to Aruba before she was even advised that Natalee was missing. All this speculation and wild crap. It does nothing to solve the case, but it also must be terrible on the family to have to sit and stomach this sort of stuff.
Well, I think it is. And, there are people who float out rumors and innuendo, and you say it's not true. Well, if someone has made up their mind, they want to believe something. If someone wants to, for some reason, we love conspiracies, whether it be the JFK conspiracy or the Waco conspiracy or the Natalee Holloway conspiracy. I mean, people want to believe there is this massive, secret government, family, police, money, Jewish, whatever it is, organization out there that has corrupted everything but that is conspiring against us all, and that somehow all of these people were able to come together. And, it's like when TWA 847 went down, and I got into I was being interviewed one time by Pierre Salinger, who was former President Kennedy's press secretary, and Pierre Salinger was the one who floated out the theory that that TWA flight, after it left New York City, had been shot down with a Navy missile fired from a U.S. naval ship. And he floated that story out, and there were people who absolutely, positively wanted to believe that the U.S. Navy would shoot a plane down, and then that everybody from the seaman recruit aboard that ship to the director of the FBI, the chief of police of the NYPD, and every other investigator and file clerk, and that everybody was part of this mass conspiracy. And I said, that the issue is that it's not that the Navy could not have accidentally shot that plane down. It's that you cannot get that many people to shut their mouth.
Yep.
Government and civilian life. You can't make a conspiracy like that work because people won't keep their mouths shut. And I think that's the same thing when we talk about Natalee Holloway. The idea that Beth was on a plane and heading down before Natalee disappeared. People roll that out because they want to believe something different. Whether they want to... When I was down in Aruba, I had anywhere from taxi drivers to cops, Aruban cops, that would tell me, we know absolutely that Natalee and her mother didn't get along together, so what really happened is that the Kalpoe brothers and Joran van der Sloot, actually, Natalee came to them